We'll continue with the subject of advancing the user experience. We'll be talking about designing the user interface, strategies for effective human-computer interaction. This is an overview of the subject for today. We'll have a brief introduction, then we'll talk about display design, the view or window management, as well as animation, web page design, using colors, and the non-anthropomorphic design, as well as error messages. So this is what is included in today's PowerPoint. So let's look at the introduction. The interface design is aiming to match art trendiness and techniques that are taught in design schools. So, user interface design is about being creative, using unique ideas, colors, pictures, graphics, sounds, animations to make the user experience friendly and enjoyable and attractive for the users. So, in the era of today's technologies, which include smartphones and tablets and thin laptops, as well as wearable computing such as the Apple Watch and various sensors, there is competition over the design experience. All of those devices have a user interface that need to be friendly, enjoyable, intuitive, and also competitive with the rest of the technologies. So within this chapter, we will talk about that the design of the user interface matters and what are the important functional issues that we need to consider when designing those interfaces and evaluating them. So the functional issues in the evaluation. The user experience evaluation. Let's look at the display and design. So to be effective, the display designs need to provide all the necessary data in proper sequence to carry on the task at hand. The researchers Mulet and Sano give a category for the design principles. Let's look at their category. They are 6 items in the category. The first one is elegance and simplicity. This means the unity of the design, the refinement, and the fitness. How is the design fit for the particular task at hand? The second category in this design principles is the scale, contrast, and proportion. How large is the item at the interface, and is it proportional to the rest of the items? Let's say we're using windows or icons. Where is this one located, and how is it contrasting with the rest of the windows? So the clarity, harmony, and activity, as well as the restraint. The third item in this category, scale, is organization and visual structure. So, grouping the items. Let's say if we have opened a bunch of windows, there needs to be a way to reorder them. Let's say all these windows are from the first task, the next from the second task, and the third from the third one. We can design an interface that allows for the grouping of similar items, as well as placing them in hierarchy. Which one is the more important and which one is the less important, and putting them in that order, or using the relationship between them. Those two are related to each other, so they will be placed into the same category or location together. And balance. So grouping, hierarchy, relationship, and balance between the visual objects from our design. Module and program would focus, that has to do with focus, flexibility, and consistent application. So once we start designing the multiple modules from our interface, we want to make sure that they are using consistent principles as the previous modules. So all modules need to look alike as part of one big system and fit with the previous ones. Next item here is the image and representation. So how about any pictures, images, or videos on our interface? When adding those, we need to consider the immediacy, generality, and cohesiveness of those images. And what do they represent? How do they assist the user for the better user experience? So, characterization. The last item in this scale is the style. So that has to do with distinctiveness, integrity, comprehensiveness, and whether it is appropriate. So our style need to be unique and distinctive from the rest, comprehensive, that it includes everything necessary, and appropriate. So the pictures and the visual aids are assisting the user in appropriate and good way with this interface. Here, for example, is a website showing the climate in NASA, showing the climate for NASA, illustrating. It is using an elegant visual design to illustrate the climate. So an image is used, as well as some controls on the top, on the menu on the top, and then underneath we have the metrics for the climate, the Arctic ice, the global temperature, and the carbon dioxide. So this NASA website uses a distinctive style. It has an image representation, and in the visual structure it is grouping the items. So those are all down here, are all together, that are showing the metrics. Another two user interface researchers called Smith and Mosier have given a data display guidelines. There are approximately 20 items in here for the data display. So for example, display data to users in direct and usable forms do not require the users convert the display data. Maintain a consistent format for any particular type of data from one display to another. If we will be posting messages to the user, use short and simple sentences. Use affirmative statements rather than negative statements. Adopt a logical principle for ordering lists. Left justify columns of alphabetic data to permit rapid scanning. When there are multi-page displays, label each page to show its relation to the others, and so on. So those two researchers have given the data display guidelines. Let's look at the field layout. So they just talked about labels, but labels are helpful for all. But frequent users. So frequent users would learn those labels and they will know them ahead of time. We need to distinguish the labels from the data. We can do that by using boldcase, for example, or italics or some other font feature to make that distinction. Blank spaces and separate lines need to be considered, and they can be distinguished. They can help to distinguish the fields. If we're using names, the names needs to be in chronological order. Boxes can be used to make a more appealing display. We need to be consider where we would fit them so that we have sufficient screen space available. If we're using dates and there are international audiences, we need to consider the date format for those other audiences. And finally, we need to consider the backgrounds and the colors used for the background, as well as the graphic icons. If we are displaying any empirical results, let's say we did some experiments and we want to show to the users the results of our experiments, that will be listing some data. This data can be in a tabular format, for example. If that's the case, we need to use a structured form that is easier, more intuitive than the narrative form for the empirical results. We need to make sure the data is appropriately labeled, because that will be important for showing this kind of experiment result, as well as to group or cluster together related results and information. So we will have groups of results cluster together. We'll be using the appropriate indentation and underlining, aligning the numerical values, and eliminating extraneous characters. That would improve performance. Also, performance times would improve with when we use fewer and denser displays for the expert users. The screen content should contain only task-related information. Let's look at sequence of displays. If there are multiple displays, we need to make sure we have consistency and use the same displays through the entire design. If the user is performing certain task, and let's say they need to go through several pages or answer several questions, they need to know where it starts and where it ends and how much they have remaining. So the user need to have some sense of how far they have gone and how far they have remaining to reach the end. It should be possible to go backwards in a sequence to correct errors or to recall information that was on the previous pages. Here's an example of display design. This is from the US Navy air traffic. This is the air traffic control work environment. which has several specialized data intensive displays. Here's another example. This is a website that allows users to register for conferences. So, as we mentioned, when there are multiple pages that need to be completed or answered, we need to show the user a sense of how far they've gone and when they will reach the end. So that is, you can see here that on the top with these orange colors here, it shows they've completed already 3 sections and only 1 section, the grayed out here, remains. Now, when we are another example of process indicator. Same as the previous page. It was showing how far they've gone. This is showing how far the system has gone. If the system, for example, is installing certain updates or disinstalling a new software, for example, it will show how far it's gone and how much it has remaining by using this blue line here. Most of it has been completed, a little bit remains. Let's look at the view on window management. As we mentioned, if we have multiple windows, we can group them by being the ones that are related to each other. That's one way to do it. Another way is to group the windows from specific application from in one place that's separate from the rest of the applications. And the third way we discussed was what? Can anyone tell us? So the user needs to consult multiple sources rapidly, and that should minimally disrupt the user task at hand. With large displays, eye-head movement and visibility need to be considered. So the eye and head movement as well as visibility need to be considered. That's for large displays. Now for small displays, we need to consider the space available. In a small space, how can we create the interface so that it has all the necessary features and it is effective? So we need to offer the user sufficient information and flexibility to accomplish the task at hand, and while reducing the window housekeeping actions. So we need to offer the user sufficient information flexibility to accomplish the task. While reducing the window housekeeping actions, for example, opening, closing, moving, and changing the size of the windows, as well as the time spent to manipulate the windows on a task. And we can apply direct manipulation strategy to the windows. We can have rooms of windows that will allow users to specify actions for several windows all at once. So this is about advancing the user experience, more advanced ways of designing the interface.